the decades, many video game franchises have evolved and changed. The technology improves, expectations shift, and things become drastically different from where they began. And on today's video, we're looking back at the humble beginnings of...
It's me, Mario!
Super Mario, the most popular video game character that's ever existed. Everyone knows who this guy is, from children to old folks to that weirdo who works at the convenience store. Like everyone else, I was introduced to the very concept of video games through this character. Growing up with Super Mario 3 was everything I needed to fall in love with this art form. For others, it was Mario 64, or maybe Mario Galaxy. Some kid is absolutely gushing at Mario Wonder this very minute because Nintendo has consistently kept the series evergreen. Whether through its mainline entries or the dozens of spin-offs, from kart racing to party games, you name it, Mario is synonymous with quality. He is the face of Nintendo, the company that has been giving us entertainment our entire lives. So naturally, I had to include him in humble beginnings. And oh boy, my friends, Mario has been a character for over 40 years. When people think of his first ever video game, they're likely thinking of Super Mario Bros. On the NES. I mean, it introduced everything. Mushrooms, the princess, Toad, Bowser and his Koopa Troop. The game was so damn fun and unlike anything out there that it ended the video game crash of the early 80s. All of a sudden, video games were kick-ass again, and everybody had to have the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a classic, it's a remarkable achievement, it's amazing, but it's not the first. No, we gotta go back further to 1981, because Mario's first appearance was in the game Donkey Kong. We have a unique situation where I'm covering the birth of two franchises. Because the big ape Donkey Kong is the titular star here, and it wouldn't be until the 90s that he would branch off and star as the hero of his own thing. Thanks to Rareware's Donkey Kong Country franchise, the gorilla has carved out a new identity, living in the jungle, riding rhinos, and stomping crocodiles that want to steal his bananas. A platformer series that always gets the highest of praises, it's another brilliant feather under Nintendo's cap. But when DK's not doing that, he's still sticking his nose in Mario's business. There's a reason that the ape is in Mario Kart and Mario Party, and why these two fight each other in the movie. In a way, they're almost like brothers themselves, born at the same time to the same daddy, a Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto. Donkey Kong was the first video game he ever designed or directed, arguably the most important project of his life. This game may be the birth of certain characters, but I would argue it is instrumental in the formation of Nintendo as we know it today. This video isn't just about Mario, this is the origin point of a great many things. So, let's discuss why. Let's talk about Donkey Kong. Now, Donkey Kong is an arcade game, and to understand the landscape and culture that led to its success, we must go back to the very beginning, to the creation of Nintendo itself, which was back in let me get my notes. What the hell? 1889? Nintendo has been around for longer than a century before any world war. Now obviously, no, Nintendo Koppai, as it was known back then, was not dealing in video games. Back then, the company manufactured playing cards, which it did for a great number of decades. And then at some point in the 1960s, they decided to branch out and start making toys. Stuff like extending boxing gloves and baseball launchers and magic roulette, you know. Things that'll make your children happy. But when the 1970s rolled around, we saw the birth of the video game. And when all the kids are plugging away trying to beat each other at Pong, Nintendo figured that they needed a cut of the action. This led to the creation of the color TV game, Nintendo's first home console. And then they decided to experiment with LCDs to give us the Game & Watch. But more than anything, they needed to become a force in the arcades. And what kind of games did they make? The same thing as everybody else. Before Donkey Kong, every game was either a ball and paddle thing or a space shooter. Pong, Breakout, Asteroids, Space Invaders, Missile Command, Centipede, Galaxian, Defender. All of these games are iconic, but they're also very similar. Nintendo made Monkey Magic, which was basically Breakout. They made Space Fever, which is basically Space Invaders. I'm not even being glib, I mean look at the footage. It is a shameless carbon copy. They followed the trends and made what everyone else was making, leading to the creation of Radar Scope. Another space shooter where you blast UFOs, this one did fairly well in Japan. But Nintendo's financial situation wasn't doing so hot, and they needed more profit. So, they decided to start shipping their games overseas. And which one was bound to win over Western audiences? Why, Radar Scope, of course. They went all in, like they made a ridiculous number of cabinets, thinking this was going to be a hit, and instead it flew under the radar, ha ha ha. I mean, not only did it look like every other game in the arcade, but it also happened to release in the same month as this game. You can't compete with Pac-Man Fever. But this was a devastating failure for Nintendo, and the company's president, Hiroshi Yamauchi, needed to fix it fast. They needed a new game, something that was unique and fun that could be salvaged from Radar Scope's technology. For this, he turned to a young 28-year-old named Shigeru Miyamoto. Why? Because in his own words, no one else was available. Now, Mr. Miyamoto joined Nintendo back in 1977, and he did work on some video games down the line, but Donkey Kong was his first real creation. It was his design, his characters, the first game to feature his wonderful imagination. So what is the premise of Donkey Kong? Well, basically, a giant gorilla has kidnapped a woman in New York and is climbing to the top of a building with her. As her boyfriend, it's up to you to chase after them and defeat the mighty Donkey Kong. Which, okay, now that I say it out loud, this is basically just the ending to 1933's King Kong. But with that movie also featuring a giant gorilla that kidnaps a woman, climbs up a building, who is ultimately knocked off to his defeat. It doesn't help that the word Kong is in the title. This actually led to Universal Pictures trying to sue Nintendo for copyright infringement, but unfortunately for them, they already convinced the courts that King Kong was in the public domain. That's how they got to make the 1976 remake, after all. Oops. Miyamoto apparently thought up the name trying to establish how dumb and stubborn the character was. Like, you think of the term stubborn as a mule? Well, what's another word for mule? Donkey. Therefore, Donkey Kong. But hey, at least the monkey got a name. The player character is exactly who you think it is. The overalls, the mustache, the hat, everyone will correctly identify him as Mario. But that wasn't his name at first. Back then, he was just an avatar for the player, a character defined by his one singular trait. That being that he can jump. He jumps over barrels, he jumps from platform to platform. He is the Jumpman. Even the Arcade Archives version of this game on Switch still refers to the character as such in the tutorial menu. Also, the woman you're trying to save is not Pauline, she's just a lady. Save the lady from Donkey Kong. That's the goal, that's all you need to know, because character wasn't really important back then. Of course, when the game became a big success and started popping up on Atari and stuff, they decided it might be a good idea to establish some identity. And so they became Mario and Pauline. You gotta love these old versions of the characters. Jumpman in his red overalls and blue shirt, instead of bursting at the seams with a jolly smile, he's got an angry grimace.
Hey, how you doing? You know, I'm under your sink, maybe too much is showing. Don't bother me.
I think he looks the worst in the Atari box art. It looks less like he's trying to save his girlfriend, and more like he wants to grab Donkey Kong's ass. I mean, it is spectacular. You know, it's funny that in the artwork, the lady is wearing this sexy red dress where you can see her arms and legs. Such a bombshell, who wouldn't want to get her back? But then you actually play the game, and the girl is way more modest. She looks like she just got saved from the train tracks of an old western. Or maybe she's dating a guy who eats lots of spinach. Either way, you'd be forgiven for thinking that she was Princess Peach, what with the pink dress and all. It wouldn't be until 1994 that DK would get his necktie and Pauline would turn into a brunette. And slight tangent, but can I just say, I am so happy that she's finally joining the fun. She was the original Mario girl, and she got completely neglected for decades. Now in the 2020s, she's finally playing sports, driving in Mario Kart, and having fun at the Jamboree. It took forever, but the best Mario girl is finally getting her flowers. Good lord. But enough of this hogwash. We know the premise, we see how different these characters were, but what is Donkey Kong? Well, it is arguably the first ever platformer. No, seriously. Before 1981, how many games can you think of that weren't about shooting things in outer space? Some people like to say that Space Panic came first, but that game doesn't have a jump button. You walk and you fall. That's hardly the same thing. But in Donkey Kong, your first death will come pretty quickly if you don't do what comes natural. For whatever reason, this construction site has an unlimited supply of barrels, and DK's throwing every single one to prevent Jumpman's ascent. That's a halo above his head! Jumpman is dead! By pushing the jump button, you leap over the obstacle and earn yourself some points. I love that little jingle. Though it seems to be quite finicky, as 20% of the time the game doesn't register the act and forgets to give you points, which is not ideal for an arcade game. But I'm far more concerned with just surviving, period. Jumping over the barrels requires good timing, and some of these things have a mind of their own. You can try to take shortcuts by climbing the ladders, but the barrels sometimes roll down those too. Not only can it kill you mid-climb, but it can also join another barrel rolling down below, reducing the window at which you need to leap over them. And Jumpman is not exactly a spry fellow. Sure, his jumps are perfect in Mario 64, but when the guy needs to leap immediately after landing on the ground, he has a bit of a delay. As such, you'll feel like you tried to jump out of the way, but the game just wouldn't let you. These damn wooden death traps, I just want to smash every single one of them! Luckily, the opening screen has 2 hammers that you can pick up, which allow you to do just that. As soon as Jumpman grabs these tools, he just keeps smashing forward over and over again until the effect wears off. But this isn't a form of invincibility. While nothing could kill Pac-Man when he grabbed the power pellet, it is still possible for hazards to slip through the cracks. When Jumpman lifts his hammer, barrels can still slide in. Son of a bitch! Also, all of these objects eventually end up in an oil drum, which lights on fire. And I don't know what the hell's in these things, but sentient fireballs pop out to chase after our hero. Why is the fire alive, and why is it trying to kill me? Well, it's mostly to scare me off of the first beam and keep me moving. Being an arcade game, they always want extra players to pump in more quarters, so naturally, if you take too long getting to Donkey Kong, the time runs out. And then Jumpman has a heart attack. So many ways for this poor carpenter to die. Oh yeah, Jumpman is a carpenter. Although going by the sound of his shoes, I would have assumed he was a clown. I think it's supposed to be the clanking of the steel girders, but oh boy, you always knew when someone was playing Donkey Kong in the arcade. Anyway, should you overcome all of the barrels, Jumpman will eventually reach his lady love. Only for DK to once again grab her. I would have tried beating him up with the hammer, but alas, you can't jump or climb ladders when you're using it. But after reaching the top, you now find yourself in a conveyor belt section because unlike Pac-Man, this game has multiple screens. They weren't kidding when they asked you, how high can you get? You know, Sonic 06 is actually a pretty good game. But new to this stage are lots of items that can be grabbed for points. A parasol, a purse, and a box of tissues, a printer. Let me check what the information says. A sunflower hat? That looks nothing like a hat. Am I crazy? And again, for the longest time, I thought this screen was some kind of pie factory, which is kind of a weird way for someone to die. But then I looked it up and, oh, they're cement tubs. It's boiling hot cement. Now I gotcha. Whatever, Our Lady has dropped her belongings and you get extra points for retrieving them. Kinda like the fruit in Pac-Man. It was also at this point that I noticed grabbing the hammer actually turns the fire enemies from red to blue. Kind of like Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde. Again, Pac-Man released just as Radar Scope hit Western shores, so I'm not shocked that Mr. Miyamoto would borrow from such a popular game. The second screen is actually a lot easier than the first, and I don't often die here. But then we come to the third area, and this is where all the platforming is. You may not be under threat from rolling barrels, but the timing of your jumps still matters. For if Jumpman misses the mark... God. Unlike most Mario games, this guy can't handle massive fall damage. Actually, he can't handle tiny fall damage either. What? That killed you? Christ, dude, you got weaker knees than Saul Goodman. It's certainly not fun that you have to jump to platforms around your elevation. Trying to be a daredevil, that just gets you killed. But along with fireballs that are still moving around trying to catch you, this stage has jacks. Springs that come in from off-screen, traveling across the end pathway and down to the platforms below. Like everything in this game, they can kill Jumpman in one hit, which means you really gotta pay attention to their bouncing, knowing where to stand and when to haul ass to the ladders. Cause you could be mid-climb and oops, it clipped your leg, you're dead, bye-bye. You start the game off with 3 lives and you can get another one when you achieve 7,000 points. Like that specific score. I can get to 70,000 points, but I never collected 10 1-ups for doing so. They want people to pump in more quarters, so you only get 4 tries. And boy, dying to a jack at the end of the screen is the worst because then you have to climb up those platforms all over again. But eventually, your tenacity will prevail. You'll arrive at the final screen, where DK stands above all. The only way to defeat this monkey is to take out the ground from underneath him. And to do so, we must grab all of the bolts that are keeping this platform together. But while you're doing so, the fireballs from the oil drum are making one last advance. And boy, do they start flooding the screen after a while. Now you can jump over them just like the barrels, but because they're always moving in erratic ways, trying to follow and corner you, you may find that they start moving backwards as you make the leap. Luckily, the game once again supplies you with hammers, which can pound them into oblivion. But keep in mind, when you take out a bolt, you're leaving an open space that Jumpman can fall through. You're allowed to walk over it once, but you can't do so a second time. If you follow a fireball to the edge with a hammer and kill it, you'll be stuck doing nothing since you can't jump or climb until the effect wears off. It might be a worthwhile strategy to save some of these for last, so that the hammer can get the most use. But we're faster than any fireball, and once we take out the last one... Jumpman saves the girl, defeats that stubborn ape, and everyone lives happily ever after. Well, maybe not Donkey Kong, but don't worry, there's a sequel just for that. But this is such a novel thing that I really love about this game. It's an arcade game with a proper victory. I mean, what happens at the end of Asteroids? You get killed by an asteroid. What happens at the end of Pac-Man? Pac-Man gets killed by the ghosts. And while yes, the game isn't over yet and death is still on the horizon, at least as far as the story is concerned, there's a sense of accomplishment. I saved the girl and I beat Donkey Kong. I can leave the arcade feeling pretty good about myself. Really great for a casual audience that has no idea just how brutal the game gets from here. Because yes, when DK is defeated, the game resets and takes you back to the first screen. But now, it's slightly harder. Donkey Kong starts off throwing a metal barrel diagonally from the very beginning, and it can be kinda shocking since we've never seen him do that before. It feels like the barrels go down ladders a lot more, like they're alive and they're genuinely trying to corner you. The fireballs increase in speed, the jacks come out more frequently, everything feels a bit more heightened, you know? And I'm still operating on those 4 lives I've had since the very start. But hey, I can still beat Donkey Kong a second time. You even get a new jingle for doing so. But Loop 3 is when the game's like, okay, asshole, you know how to play, let's turn on Jumpman Must Die mode. That first barrel goes much farther, and DK's just throwing these things in the most unpredictable ways. Jesus Christ, what the hell was that? The way these barrels will bounce around is insane, man! And good lord, the fireballs! I said the second screen wasn't so bad. Well, that's until I got to Loop 3, and then they just start pouring out of the oil drums like I owe them money. They go down ladders so fast now, it genuinely gets your heart pumping. And oh my god, the jacks. The speed and frequency at which they come out, you gotta be perfect. You need to get ahead of some of them and just know when to move on that pixel perfect frame. It's ridiculous. I used save states to try and figure it out, and I still died like a dozen times. I couldn't imagine how brutal this was in the 80s, how much money people spent trying to get back to this point just so that they could figure it out too. I mean, I love watching The King of Kong, a documentary that follows a man named Steve Wiebe as he tries to break the Donkey Kong world record. He knows all of the crazy tricks, like how to fake out those bloodthirsty barrels. Eventually, he reaches the kill screen. That's when the game runs out of memory and Jumpman just croaks from the sheer awesomeness of the player. When does the kill screen occur? On loop number 22. That means he had to have defeated Donkey Kong 21 times in one sitting on only 4 lives. Full disclosure, without save states, after 6 hours of play, I only got to loop number 4. And I died to this nonsense. Thanks for that. My high score for this particular session was 70,600 points. On the Japanese version. For you see, Donkey Kong has an alternate international version which handles the screens a bit differently. See, at first, it feels like it's dumbed down, because in Loop 1, after you clear the first stage, you arrive at the final stage. What the hell? I'm already at the end? Well, that's anticlimactic. But then you do Loop 2, and all of a sudden, it adds in the elevator level. Do Loop 3, and it adds in the cement one. Okay, good. It just takes 3 loops to get the full proper game. But then you get to Loop 4, and it adds an extra barrel stage. Yeah, you gotta go through that first screen again. And then on Loop 5, it adds a 3rd barrel level, maxing out the total amount per loop to 6 screens total. Apparently, you can get higher than 100 meters. So, keep in mind, when Steve Wiebe defeated Donkey Kong 21 times, he didn't clear 84 screens. He beat Over 100 of them. Jesus! On the international version, I can only muster a pitiful 38,000 points. Because it takes no time at all for the barrel and final stages to get bone-crushingly difficult, I find I get eliminated a lot quicker than I would the Japanese original. And this is on Switch with a Pro controller. If I was actually using the joystick of the arcade cabinet, I probably wouldn't have done that well. Donkey Kong is hard! This is one of those games that looks simple enough, but Jesus, is it super punishing. You know, it's funny. When Donkey Kong 64 came out, everybody was so upset about one particular obstacle that was preventing them from seeing the final boss. And it was the original Donkey Kong. You had to play a built-in version in order to acquire a special silver coin, which opens the door to the ending. But you had to do it in one life on loop number 2. Yeah, when the game is slightly harder than usual. I couldn't be there to see people react in the 80s, but my 64 loving friends, they curse Donkey Kong. They loathe Donkey Kong. They despise the fact that if they ever want to beat the game again, they have to go through the original to do so. As for myself, I could never hate this game. Every now and then I'll come back to do a casual one-loop run where I beat the Great Ape and save the girl, and that's all I really need, you know? I love Donkey Kong. It absolutely deserves to be remembered as one of the greatest arcade games ever made. The sound effects and the jingles are pure bliss. The gameplay is addicting, and it's fun learning how to navigate the barrels and platforms. Even the cabinet itself is friggin' precious. That banner with the 4 portraits and the side sketches, I mean, it's just so iconic. There's a reason that Wreck-It Ralph heavily based the Fix-It Felix game off of Donkey Kong. There's a reason that in Pixels, Adam Sandler's final opponent was
Donkey Kong.
friggin' Ice Cube was rapping about this game back in 1992.
It's on like Donkey Kong. You wanted that fast.
The popularity of Donkey Kong cannot be understated. Like Pac-Man, it just had this broad appeal that made it into a massive hit. Nintendo went from being in financial trouble to making millions in merchandise alone. There were toys, board games, even a friggin' cereal.
Mario, save me! Kids, I'm gonna jump, you're gonna crunch. Here we go!
Whoa, wait a minute, did I just hear that right?
Here we go!
Dude, this commercial came out in like 1983. This is way before Charles Martinet ever came close to defining the character.
Here we go!
Here we go.
Oh, the universe sure works in mysterious ways. When your franchise is being put into Hanna-Barbera cartoons, you've made it. So naturally, Shigeru Miyamoto became something of a hero himself. Everyone at Nintendo realized that this guy had the sauce, and his creativity was exactly what their games needed. An adventure about a kid in a green tunic? We could give that a shot, I guess. Donkey Kong was the domino that knocked everything over. Could you imagine what Nintendo would be if the game bombed? Or if Shigeru Miyamoto never joined the company? A timeline where gaming exists without Nintendo is unthinkable. The game is incredibly important, and it absolutely deserves to be remembered. And you know, I could end the video here, but I figured I should cover my bases. No doubt someone in the comments would nitpick and say, "Now Clement, Donkey Kong is the first Donkey Kong game, but it's not the first Mario game. It doesn't even have Mario in the title. What, are we gonna call Mario Land 2 the first Wario game? Your channel used to be so much better when you made Let's Plays, you dumb lazy bitch." Well, first off, that last part was just incredibly rude. But you know what? I agree. You guys waited quite a bit for this video, so it needs a little extra something. Let's cover our bases and talk about the first game with Mario in the title. Let's cover the Mario Brothers. Whoa, 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 whoa! Hold your horses, buckaroo! I didn't say the Super Mario Brothers. I was talking about the arcade original. So one thing I didn't mention about the plumber, formerly known as Jumpman, is why he was designed the way he was.
Why does everything have to have a mustache?
When we created the original 8-bit art, we needed to give him a nose so it looked like his face, and we gave him a mustache so you could tell where the nose was.
And honestly, yeah, the original sprite of Jumpman is actually really detailed for 1981. He and Donkey Kong still both hold up pretty well. And when you got a character this easy to animate who people have just become familiar with, I mean, why not use him again? You want to make a game about wrecking construction sites? Well, Mario's a blue-collar guy. He could do it. You want to make a silly game about mixing cement? Well, Mario could do that too. Mario can block the pinballs. Mario can be Mike Tyson's referee. Mario could be a doctor. He can be an athlete. He can be a painter. He can be a criminal.
But it's a me, Mario!
Yeah, tell it to the judge.
Get in or get out.
He just has this unique, marketable quality. And when Mr. Miyamoto and programmer Gunpei Yokoi wanted to make an arcade game that could be enjoyed by 2 players, of course, they used Mario. Since Player 2's character would have to look exactly the same as Player 1, it was established right then and there that Mario had a brother. This marks the first appearance of the character Luigi. So what's the premise of Mario Brothers?
Something's coming up the plumbing, poor Luigi's in a bind. Giant turtles out to get him, creepy crabs are right behind. Fighter flies, cheaper shikes, they're all coming out the pipes.
Mario, where are you?
It's Atari Mario Brothers with Mario from Donkey Kong, his brother Luigi, and lots of crazy creatures.
Again, it's just fascinating looking into a time capsule where Mario was known for being in Donkey Kong and not, everything else. Also kind of amazing that this commercial depicts Luigi as a scaredy cat who needs his brother's help. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Actually, going by the game's official artwork, I would almost peg it to be the opposite. You got Mario looking all nervous, and Luigi is the one being really angry about it. Almost like he was the macho, impulsive, bullheaded brother. And look at those colors. Usually it's color coordinated, that there's blue-red, blue-green, but Luigi just decided he wanted to start his career by wearing a brown shirt. And Mario? Well, he's just completely inverted his color scheme from the last game. You look at the names next to the score, and obviously Luigi's is green, but Mario's is blue. Even the arcade cabinet makes the distinction of player 2's side being green and player 1 being blue. It's just very interesting to think of Mario as a blue character and not a red one as is typical nowadays. Ultimately, he goes on to keep his overalls and shirt from this game, but retains the red hat from Donkey Kong. Luigi, of course, follows suit, because the brown doesn't really bring out his beautiful eyes. Anyway, in this game, our hero's occupation has changed from carpenter to plumber, and now he's deep in the sewers of New York to clean out the pipes. Because inexplicably, the system's being taken over by giant mutant critters. What the hell happened to the flies to make them as big as a human? But before you see those guys, you have to eliminate something else first. Giant walking turtles.
Man, I spent hours of my life stomping Koopas in the original Mario Brothers arcade game.
Now, I'm sure Chris Pratt is a very nice gentleman, but he's definitely a fake fan. I'm sorry, Star-Lord, but in the original game, these enemies were not called Koopas. They were shell creepers. Oh, and you stomped them? Did you, Chris? Because here's what happens when I try that. Oh yeah, I just friggin' die. I hope you get fired, you bastard. Unless you were referring to Versus Super Mario Brothers, because that was technically an arcade game. And, well, that would sure make me look like an asshole now, wouldn't it? But for all intents and purposes, this is kind of the first version of the Koopa. And going against what we now know as tradition, Mario and Luigi can't just jump on these guys normally. How Mario Brothers works is that the bad guys come out through these green pipes at the top, and they just keep moving until they reach the bottom of the screen. They exit through another set of pipes, returning back to the point from whence they came. Since you can't stomp these guys, you have to do the next best thing: flip them over. By jumping directly into the platforms, Mario can use his fist to punch it so hard it creates a shockwave effect. This knocks over the turtle, letting you walk up to the guy and kick him into the water. Also in the center of the screen is a giant POW block, and when you smash it, a massive quake rumbles the sewer. Anything touching the ground will fall over. But you only get so many uses of this item, and once it's gone for good. Mario himself is a lot faster this time around, and his knees have gotten a lot better so he doesn't take fall damage anymore. Thank God. But he's still pretty stiff when it comes to jumping in a certain direction. You have no air control as soon as you leave the ground, and now you're heavily driven by momentum. When you stop pushing the controller, Mario takes a bit to stop completely, and making a hard turn in the other direction doesn't happen quickly. The thing you're gonna have to get used to the most is trying to jump in the opposite direction of where you're facing. The open spaces that you have to jump through to reach the top are very narrow, and if you're not pushing a direction before you jump, all you're gonna do is jump straight up. So it becomes a delicate motion of pushing both the direction and the jump at the exact same time so you navigate through the area a lot quicker. I mean, you could just rely on building up speed beforehand, but later down the line, these sewers get awfully crowded, and you're gonna wanna pick up this skill. I mean, the character moves pretty slow, but sometimes you gotta be fast. When you flip over the shell creepers, you have 7 seconds to kick them into the water. Otherwise, they're just gonna get back up again. And yeah, I love the fact that the turtles actually physically leave their shell so that they can flip it back over. I always thought this started with Super Mario World, but apparently it's been a thing since the very beginning. If enemies recover from a flip, they come back angry. The shell creepers turn from green to purple and move just a bit faster. And when you're down to the final enemy, that guy goes into complete desperation mode, moving extra fast and gaining a red shell. It's actually awkward when you kill one guy and all of a sudden his final buddy comes barreling at you like a freight train. But the turtles are simple enough. It's when everybody else comes in that the game gets tough.
You got crabs, ass face!
At Phase 5, you get sidesteppers, enemies that take 2 hits to knock over. And after delivering the first, they get super aggro and speed up. This also throws a wrench into the POW block situation, since you can create a giant shockwave, sure, but it won't down these guys. And if you decide to hit the POW block a second time, all you're doing is flipping the shell creepers back to normal. Yeah, you can accidentally set enemies back on their feet. If you're trying to jump over one guy and inadvertently hit the platform above you doing so, there's a good chance you're saving one of the baddies. If it was just the critters coming out of the pipes, that'd be one thing. But no, a returning element from Donkey Kong has to rear its ugly head. The goddamn fireballs. You'll be standing around waiting for the enemies to get above you, and then the damn flames pop out from the side of the screen to chase after you. And it's not random. They definitely go to your section of the map if you've been hanging around there for too long. This is one of the reasons you're constantly on the move in this game, and why the momentum can often get you killed. And you really gotta pay attention because this area is so small that it actually loops into itself. If you go all the way to the right, you come out on the left side of the screen. But this also applies to the enemies too. If you're not paying attention to what's happening on the other side, you may find yourself dying to an unexpected surprise. And then the fighter flies come in, enemies that don't walk but instead hop around. As you can imagine, you can't knock over something that's not touching the floor. You have to wait patiently for the right moment to do so. But when these guys are being bunched with 2-hit crabs and asshole turtles, it gets pretty hectic.
But wait! There's more!
And finally, the slip ice enter the picture. Sentient icicles that slide out of the pipes, stop at the center of a platform, and then proceed to turn it into ice. You thought the momentum was bad before? Well, if you're not jumping, the Mario Brothers are gonna be slipping and sliding into every enemy they see. And at phase 17, the top platforms just straight up become ice, raining down icicles for even more mayhem. It's an arcade game. Naturally, it was going to get ball-bustingly hard. But still, the game is fun. There are so many intricacies that you pick up as you keep playing. The fact that you can actually manipulate where the enemies bounce when you flip them. When Mario punches the ceiling, he creates a pretty wide shockwave, and so the enemies actually react to where the effect is in relation. If you jump directly below them, they just fall in place. Jump into the right or left of them, and they'll go flying in the opposite direction. I often waited until I was just to the side because I knew it would knock them down the hole, thereby saving me the hassle of having to go after them. Fireballs can be defeated. While you don't have a hammer this time around, they can still be eliminated with a POW block, and you can hit the ground that they're hovering over, which extinguishes them quite nicely. When enemies meet up, they don't just pass by, they actually bump into each other and have to go into the opposite direction. These little details all add so much flavor to the experience, the stuff that made Nintendo games a cut above the competition. And speaking of bumping into people, I guess I should talk about the multiplayer aspect. Technically, Donkey Kong was also a two-player game, but all that really meant was that you and a friend took turns climbing up DK's building. You were both Jumpman, you didn't play at the same time, most people probably didn't even know that this was a thing. But Mario Brothers is different. This was an experience you could share with your significant other, a way to ease the difficulty with crowd control. Me and Carol would wait on the left and right side of the screen respectively to make sure that both sets of enemies were taken care of. And when it works, it's fantastic. But, sometimes we can get in each other's way. Luigi, no! What are you doing? Ah! The Mario Brothers can be a hazard to themselves. They don't pass by each other. If you're trying to escape a fireball and your partner won't get the hell out of the way, well, guess what? You're both dead then. You can accidentally bump your teammate into bad guys. Hell, they can jump on and stun you into place. You ever tried dropping down to a lower section only for Mario to bounce you back up because he was underneath? This is the goofy kind of co-op that I like. One of the reasons I adored New Super Mario Bros. Wii. The dickery. If you and your partner are not on the same level, you're gonna get each other killed and scream about it so much afterwards. It's not just Mario Party that ends friendships. Nintendo's been doing this shit since 1983, baby. But again, it's just so fun. It's the name of the game, Mario Brothers. This is an experience that is meant to be shared. Even if it's just the NES version on Nintendo Switch Online, it's worth going through with a friend just the one time. And, there's really not much else to say. The game has no ending the way Donkey Kong does. You just keep playing until you run out of your lives and hope to achieve the high score. The end result is just Mario and Luigi getting knocked into the water themselves. But I will say that this game definitely has more connections to what we know today than Donkey Kong itself. Like seriously, from that first game, what are the similarities? Well, Mario uses a hammer. That's a weapon he constantly relies on in the RPGs. Donkey Kong uses barrels as weapons. Barrels are still a significant part of the country games. And the oil drum. That definitely comes back as an obstacle as well. Otherwise, there's no Goombas, no Koopas, no Kremlings, no bananas, no coin blocks, no anything that you associate with both franchises. But Mario Brothers has a little bit more. The Shell Creepers are obviously phase 1 of what the Koopas became. And whenever Mario Brothers would get an update, they replaced those guys with Spinies, which makes a lot more sense as to why you can't jump on them. It would have been extra confusing having one set of turtles be invincible to jumps after we've established how Koopas operate. The fact that the enemies appear and exit from green pipes. The POW block certainly comes back. And then there's the coins. Whenever you defeat an enemy, somebody throws a coin down into the pipe so that you can collect it for points. I guess it's the people who hired the Mario Brothers to do all the plumbing. Either way, every now and then you get a bonus minigame where you have to collect all the coins, and whenever this shows up, it also resets the POW block as well. It's just a fun game that basically acts as the teaser for what would come later. Super Mario Bros. Is just more fantastical. It takes these grounded Italian brothers into a world of pure imagination, where mushrooms can make them mighty and strong, where their limited world of small dark rooms expands into a grand adventure.
They're the nice guys, and the guys who are suddenly thrown into this fantasy world where they've got the ultimate challenge ahead of themselves. Can they rescue a princess? Can they save the world? And that's all of us.
I couldn't have put it better myself. Mario is a franchise that has always been fun. A place of pure whimsy where everyone's inner child comes out in a major way. Mario Galaxy is my personal favorite Mario game, and it might be the most magical, joyful, transcendent kids platformer that I have ever played. I couldn't imagine gaming without Mario. I couldn't imagine it without Nintendo. And the games I covered today are all responsible for ensuring that legacy. Without Donkey Kong, we wouldn't have The Legend of Zelda, or Kirby, or Metroid, or any of the games that you love today. It gave Miyamoto the freedom to pursue his ambitious ideas. It gave other developers the inspiration they needed to create their own masterpieces. So much of this culture owes everything to these initial sparks, to the games that changed the landscape and showed everyone that it wasn't just an electronic toy. It wasn't just some fad that was meant to come and go. Video games are just so damn special, and I've been trying to articulate that my whole entire life. And now you know Nintendo's humble beginnings. Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching. I definitely needed a breather after Mortal Kombat because I haven't taken one for myself in a number of years, and I used to do that all the time whenever summer rolled around. Burnout is indeed a son of a bitch, but I think I'm feeling recharged at long last. I'm just gonna keep on keeping on, and hopefully you guys turn up whenever I do. Thanks again, and you guys have yourselves a happy new year.